I would like to start the evening with saying thank yous. Yehudi is milashon haida, which means to thank and acknowledge, and I have a long list of thank yous. For the soup, thank you, Racheli Imini, Mrs. Till Frankel, Dvar Leah Lillian. For the salad, Elisheva Waxel, Mrs. Frimmerman, Shoshana Dubrow, and Yehudis Malager. For the beautiful cut-up fruit, Chaya Libero and Esti Levitansky, thank you for the water bottles. Thank you, Ruchama Langsam, for the veggies, rainbow veggies. And thank you, Sushiko and Meshuggah for sushi, for the sushi. Desserts, Mushki Gorevich, Tipora Bibian, Henny Wilovik, Adi Khazan, Shendo Klik, Varen Kashani, Mushka Libero, Malka Ganjian, Batya Tate, Mrs. Shoshana Reber, Tova Feiner, Meryl Levitansky, Shayna Boyarsky, Malki Lesha, Shady Pinson, Gila Lipsker, Schwartz Bakery made the beautiful Chassan Kala cake, Le Palais Bakery, the beautiful fruit tarts, Napoleons, and eclairs, and chocolate strawberry, Cindy Topo, Miriam Ravnoy, Esther Schwartz, and Rivka Saraf. Thank you to Lark for the beautiful flowers. Thank you for the poem printing, universal printing, for the paper goods, Mr. and Mrs. Andruzier, for the setup and behind the scenes. Thank you to Tova Zakaria, who is literally with me for the past few months, every single day and night. Tova, should I do this color or that color, this plate or that plate, this candle or that color, every little detail. She helped me bring every single prop that you see here. It's a lot of stuff. Thank you, Tova. Is she here? Okay, we'll send this to her. Esti Levitansky, Simi God, Nomi Gassman, Shoshana Mansuri, Maryasha Marazav, Elisheva Waxel, Liron Zavi and her kids, Chani Levin, Angela Simons, Ayala Salami, Shayna Boyarsky, Ada Kunin, who's really special, who came to help set up, even though she's not in this class, she's out of town, very special. Malka Ganjian, Geula Newman, Robin Aron, Leah Schmuckler, Vicky Morovich for hosting our speaker, thank you. I don't know where she is. Shayna Gansberg giving a ride to the speaker, Chaya Lulian, davening at the aisle for me today in New York early this morning. Mushki Lulian, thank you for the props and the beautiful tablecloth matching. My Mashpia, Hashem, the Rebbe, and last but not least, my amazing husband, who's the man who put up with me the past few months, literally giving my life for this. Avremo Hashem Shabenshu, with all the brachas, all the technology, all the cool videos every week, all the Zooms, all the behind the scenes is my amazing husband, who I literally cannot do anything without him. And I also want to say a thank you to Ruti Naughton, who is very selfless and helped me every single week with cleanup till 1 in the morning. Thank you, Ruti. I want to thank Rabbi Reva and his Rebbitzin for giving us a Das Torah and all the donors of the raffle prizes. Thank you. I've dedicated all 3 classes this year to our amazing and caring Rav, Rabbi Reichik, who unfortunately passed away 3 months ago. It's a loss for thousands of people who felt a loss that's too painful to adequately describe in words. People felt comfortable calling him because he showed such kindness, such care, and sensitivity. I would like to also dedicate tonight's class to Mrs. Leah Miriam Heidingsfeld, who is a true Yerushalayim and a mikvah lady in Melbourne, Brentwood, and Chabad of Tarizana, who returned her soul to Hashem this year. I would also like to dedicate to Rebbitzin, Sarah Rochel Shacha, and Chaim Mishkushpalta, may the neshama have an aliyah. The theme of tonight is based on a beautiful story in the Parsha of Parshas Vayetze. Reuven was going for a walk one day and found dudayim flowers, also known as jasmine or mandrakes, and brought it to his mother, Leah, like you see over there. Rachel happened to be near Leah's tent, and she saw those flowers, and she asked her older sister, Leah, can I please have those flowers? Because those flowers were special for conceiving children. Leah replied yes, and agreed in exchange for having the privilege of Yaakov being in her tent that night, even though she was supposed to be that night with Rachel. It says, "Vatetze Leah lekrasai, vatamer Eli tavai." Leah went and adorned herself. She beautified herself. And when she heard the camels approaching, she ran to greet her husband Yaakov and welcome him and redirect him to her tent instead of Rachel as originally planned. The Ara Chaim says, "Biritzayna uvidatai shehiskim al hadavar." He went willingly and wholeheartedly. Hashem saw deep in Leah's heart and understood she desired to be with her husband, and from that union, her and Yaakov were blessed that night with Yisachar. Yisachar is Yesh Schar, if you break it up in 2 words. She was rewarded for adorning herself, beautifying herself to attract her husband. This child Yisachar, we know, was one who excelled in Torah learning and was one of the forerunners of the 200 descendants of him who were the Sanhedrin, Roshi Sanhedrin, who sat at the Lishkas Hagassis. From this episode, other Chachamim comment about the virtue of Leah to create a setting that our husbands are excited about us. Mi she'ishtai miratzai sai b'divrei ratzai u'mekashetas lefanev kidei she'yitei datai aleha. Al zeh amar Rabbi Seinu she'yaitzeh mimena chachamim u'nevainim kileah she'yatza mimena Yisachar. From here we learn that if a wife appeases her husband and adorns herself, so her husband pays attention to her and encourages her husband to have relations with her, Chachamim say from this, well, she will be married to have children who surpass the children in the generation of Moshe Rabbeinu. Tonight, we are fortunate to have with us the world-renowned speaker who came all the way from Vermont, thank you for leaving your family, to inspire us in our role in this holy mitzvah of intimacy behind closed doors. I hope everyone will come home with tools to create this special union, which will create neshamas that will say, Zeh Keli V'Anvehu, with the coming of Mashiach now. And I have thank yous that we'll do at the end, presents for all the amazing friends of mine who helped the past few months. Please give your undivided attention to the one and only. Thank you.
Thank you, Dvorah Leah. And we have a short surprise from Chaya. I was just going to say, I'm not Mrs. Crispe, but I just wanted to say one quick thing. Tonight was put together by the Taras HaMishpacha organization of LA. Now, most organizations have fundraisers, people that work for months on fundraising. Most organizations have people who imagine the whole thing and plan, and then they have people that actually put it together, and people that coordinate, and then people that come set up, and then people that do all the behind the scenes. Our community has someone who I'm very lucky to call my sister-in-law, Dvorah Leah Waksho, and we wanted to thank you. A small token of our appreciation from the whole community.
Thank you. May you see all the brachas and open and revealed in every area of your life. Please come on, Mrs Sarah Esther Crispe. Yeah, we have cards for questions. We're not going to be taking questions during this session at all, but there are cards. If you have a question at the end, we'll be giving them out so you can write down your question. Okay. Now that hopefully everybody has their food and has signed in, it can be quiet so we can all hear our amazing speaker. Thank you so much.
No, definitely not this. Yeah. With
Okay.
this. Yeah. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Excellent. All right. So it is wonderful being here. I'm actually from Los Angeles originally, from Northridge. So it's always great when I get to come back and see friends and see everybody. Now I live in very, very rural Vermont. So it's a very different type of reality. But when I was actually asked to give this talk, and I was told the subject was intimacy, I was a little concerned. A few years back, I was leading a trip called Israel Links, which is for college students. We had this amazing program, and the young women on the program wanted to have a very open discussion about intimacy and Judaism, and great, let's do it. So we were staying at a hotel in Jerusalem, and we were on on the patio doing this talk. Really in-depth talk. It was great. It was wonderful. We covered a lot, and at the end of it, you know, they're all like, woo, and it ends, and as soon as they stop clapping, we keep hearing, woo! And I'm like, where did that come from? So we we were out on the patio. Turns out directly under our floor was the outdoor restaurant, and directly under them was the swimming pool, and everybody was standing there. So it was, needless to say, I had a little trauma associated with speaking about the topic, but tonight I'm very happy doors are closed and we're in one contained room. So to begin with, I'm going to hold up, hopefully this will work, hold up a statement that you're going to read. We'll see if this works. Tape held. Okay. Everybody read out loud. A woman without her man is nothing. Very flattering, right? Okay, so now let's see if this part works. Hold on. Don't walk out yet. Okay. Okay, read it again. A woman without her man is nothing, right? So clearly, so much when it comes to intimacy, when it comes to many areas in our learning, is all going to depend on how we choose to punctuate it. How do we choose to read it, to understand it, to see it, to hear it, to identify with it? 1 second. So when it comes to the Torah approach, it is definitely not that either man nor woman is nothing, but clearly we are a team. There's a beautiful explanation, allusion to this, and that the Hebrew word for man is ish, the Hebrew word for woman, isha. They both share 2 of the same letters and differentiate in 2 other letters. They both have an aleph and a shin for ish. Ish has the yud, isha has the hey. Those 2 letters together are for Hashem. That we are dealing with a 3-way partnership here, that there is the husband, there is the wife, there is our creator, and that fire is always symbolic for intimacy, for passion, but fire can be beautiful or fire can be very destructive, right? That's why we need a fireplace, for fire to illuminate, for it to warm, for it to give that kind of beautiful glow. Has to be within a place. If fire runs rampant, it is going to completely burn and destroy everything in its way, right? And the more oxygen it gets, the more it's going to do that. My daughter is a firefighter. I have learned a lot about the biology of fire. Fire most definitely needs to be contained in a healthy, safe place in order to do what it's supposed to do without being destructive. And I do a lot of relationship coaching, marriage coaching, and when actually I knew this topic was coming up, I asked a lot of my clients, I wanted them to give me adjectives, to give me descriptions of how they view intimacy. And the range is probably not going to be surprising, but is very powerful. So here are some of the words that were shared with me. All right, we have passionate, pleasure, loving, bonding, connecting, exciting, beautiful, desirable, and then triggering, traumatizing, humiliating, sinful, painful, and unwanted. Clearly a very wide range of feelings. And of course, it's not that surprising because we are talking about something that requires us at our most vulnerable. right? So just like fire, it can be beautiful, it can be passionate, it can be destructive, it can be deadly. It is something so powerful that if used correctly is the holiest and the most powerful, and if used incorrectly is going to be the most destructive. We actually see that from the get-go when it comes to the word for a wedding, chasana, that has embedded within it both the words chen, which is balance and beauty, and also tohu, which is chaos and confusion. They're both there. They're both there from the get-go, but how is it going to manifest? How is this going to play out? How are these energies going to unfold? How are these two dynamics going to work together? And is this going to be something that grows and is beautiful, or is it going to spark and explode and destroy? So we have a beautiful concept with how this balance ideally is achieved. And we see this right in the beginning in the process of the wedding ceremony itself. This is true of Ashkenazic ceremonies, but it's a very beautiful idea. And that is that in Kabbalah in general, we have how the letters represent the various genders and how they work together. So as we're all very familiar, I am sure, with the alphabet, but just to show, because it's so beautiful how it comes together, we start, according to Chassidus and Kabbalah, the man, when we break down gender, is represented by the Vav. It's a human being standing upright, but when we divide it between man and woman, it is the man. It is numerically equivalent to 6. And it's the idea of the days of the week. Linear men are considered this idea of like the linear focus, just to clarify, as we're going to see right now anyway. The whole point is that women have masculine and feminine traits. Men have masculine and feminine traits. Generally speaking, women are predominantly feminine, men predominantly masculine, but we flip-flop constantly, and we need to flip-flop constantly in order for our relationships to work, to survive, and to thrive. So under the chuppah, the first thing that happens is the chassan, the man, the line, right? He is biologically aligned, he is physically that line. It's the idea of that intense, focused direction, walks and stands under the chuppah like a line. The next thing that happens is the woman. She is our Zion, right? The 7th. It says, Eishes Chayil Ateres Baila, that the Zion is a Vav, the human being standing upright with a crown on top. And that is the idea of the feminine, the 7th day of the week, the Shabbos queen, the feminine. And what does the woman do? The Kala walks and she circles him, right? The circle is the feminine. Men line, women, same way, physically, we are circular in that sense. And the idea of being equidistant from the center, wherever we are. So now she circles him, how many times, of course? Zion times, right? So now we have bride and groom standing under the chuppah, and they now together are the chet, which is a vav and a Zion, together, connected on top, because we are talking about a 3-way partnership. This is the 8th. We've now broken out of the natural into the supernatural, out of the finite into infinitude, the idea of being able to break boundaries and go above and beyond. And now that they stand side by side, what is going to happen is that after she walks, the ring is given, right? The ring is a circle, right? Given by the groom, because he's now the circle. If this marriage is going to work, he better tap into his feminine potential, right? He's going to need to be a circle. How is she going to receive that ring? A line, right? Now they come together, which is, by the way, symbolic and the inverse of intimacy. he is circle, she is line, but now they connect and they come together and we hold our ring like this, right? On the line with the circle. At this point, the ksuba is given, right? Ksuba, similar, right? Gerard, my husband would not be very happy if I lost said wedding ring in this. The ksuba is given, it's read, and then it's rolled to be reminiscent, right? Like of our Torah scroll. And when it is handed to her, it is both line and circle simultaneously. And the same way we start with the chassan, the vav. At this point, we read the Sheva brachas, right? The Zion, and we end. And this is this exchange of this dynamic of masculine and feminine energy, and this message that for the chasana to truly be the chen, not the tohu, we're going to need to tap into our strengths. We're going to utilize our weaknesses. Things are going to be asked of us that do not come as naturally from both of us. And we're going to need to have that flexibility to make things work. Following this actually is the section, what we call yichud, right? And now it's the idea of one. Now we're going to take all of this energy, all of these differences, the masculine and the feminine, this complete separate entities, and combine them and make one. And that's why we even see that this whole idea of yichud is becoming one. This is on a physical level, this is on a spiritual level, this is on every level there is. And this, within intimacy, we now see that we have two mitzvahs. There is the mitzvah of pru'uruvu, which we generally translate to be fruitful and multiply. And there is the mitzvah of ona, which is a separate mitzvah, is not contingent upon procreation and is by no means limited to that, and that is pleasure. Both of them happen to be mitzvahs of the man and not the woman. We are somewhat needed in both of those mitzvahs, but they are actually his obligation, both for procreation, and the pleasure is on him to pleasure the woman. And we'll get back into this a little later, but even ideally first. So those are both his domain. So now we see, though, very beautifully enough, that if the first mitzvah in the Torah is pru'uruvu, which it is, how can we have a commandment that A, is not given even, it's not the woman's commandment, so it's limited already by that, and it's a mitzvah that not everybody is capable of fulfilling. So why would we have a mitzvah that is limited in its nature? And yet we're taught that the idea of pru'uruvu is the concept of being creative. That when we use our creative energies and we utilize our talents and our unique abilities and impact the world around us, we're fulfilling the mitzvah of pru'uruvu. Obviously, it also has a physical component when possible in terms of bearing children, but it is not limited to physicality. We even see with Chava that she's called Aim Kol Chai, the mother of all life, prior to ever having children. That her motherhood, so to speak, is something that is given to her as a title before she ever gives birth. And that this procreation is constant, that when intimacy is healthy, it is always creative and it is always procreative. And I know it's mentioned in the beginning as well, but it says that for all of the years that Abraham and Sarah were intimate and didn't have children, that they created all of the souls of all of the converts for the generations to come, which is why a convert says that he is Ben or Bat Sarah Abraham, because that is when that person's soul was created. However, to be creative, one must be healthy, which is why bara, Breshit bara, is the same word as bari. That in order to truly procreate, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, physically. We need to be coming from a healthy place, and that our creativity is connected to our health, which is this idea of getting ourselves in a healthy state. So how do we even begin this process, and where do we see this? We're given a beautiful lesson prior to intimacy even happening in the mikvah preparation. I know this is the third part and that you've already gone through all of mikvah, but there is a very beautiful idea of getting into the state of mind when it comes to mikvah preparation itself. Because very often we mistakenly think that we can have our head wherever we want it. We can be thinking whatever we're thinking. We're busy, we're distracted, we're doing our thing. And then suddenly, nightfall's going to come and everything's going to shift. As somebody brilliant said, whose name I do not remember to quote, but I heard it through the very talented Masha Ben Zaken, that intimacy begins with good morning, right? Like that's the entire process. It's going to be the whole day. But so there's a story, actually, I don't know if you have seen these, but Dove Beauty Products made these like extended commercials at one point. They're Dove Beauty Secrets. And they had this really, really powerful one where they had a group of women and they asked them for 2 weeks to keep a journal and to write down every single thing they thought about themselves when they got ready in the morning, when they went to take a shower, when they looked at themselves in the mirror. Jot it down, brutally honest, write it down. What are you thinking? What crosses your mind when you look at yourself in the mirror? So they did this, and then a few weeks later, they were asked to all get together at a cafe. They were gonna have the next step in this whole process, and they show up, unbeknownst to them, in the cafe. It was filled with actors, and it was packed. So they're kind of waiting around for tables to open, and they start overhearing the conversation of the women who are at this cafe. And they're listening as one person says, like, yeah, honestly, I mean, if I were you, I would never leave the house with like that gross skin you have hanging from your neck. I mean, ugh. And they're like, oh, ow. And then, I mean, honestly, Thunder Thighs, like, what were you thinking going out today? And these women are like horrified and they're listening. And like, I mean, can you get surgery for that? I mean, your bags they're awful. They're just awful. It's embarrassing. And as they're about to intervene, they start to recognize some of these statements, and they realize that the actors are reading the lines from their journal to each other. And it ends with the tagline, if you wouldn't say it to someone else, don't say it to yourself. Mikvah is really vulnerable. We are standing there, looking at ourselves, inspecting, watching. And if any of us think that we can sit there and be self-critical and then go home and feel good about ourselves and in the right frame of mind, where we're going to be confident and loving and feeling attractive, it does not work like that. You cannot a half an hour ago be standing there going, oh, so gross. Hey, it's not going to work. It is just not going to work. So this idea of how we're supposed to view mikvah, there's a beautiful, and there are a lot of different meditations with this, but the fact that we are going to be looking and focused and examining and inspecting that every single part of ourselves, we find something so positive and so beautiful and so life-giving from. So as we're cleaning our eyes, thinking about how we want to be seen, how we want others to be seen, what we want to envision in our lives, our ears, what do we want to hear, how do we want to be heard, all of these different ideas with every single part of our body, right? So instead of looking at stretch marks and finding them disgusting. How grateful, thank God, look at this unbelievable body that carried life, that birthed life, my legs that have the strength to get me everywhere, my arms that can carry all the things I do during the day, every part of ourselves where we sit there and we focus and we find something incredible that our body does for us, because our body does a lot of incredible things. If you're not sure about it, you usually recognize that when one of those parts stops doing what it's supposed to be doing, and then you're so much more grateful for when it did exactly what it was supposed to be doing, right? So that is this idea of going into it. And that's actually why the word even mikvah is the same word as mikaveh. To hope, what do I hope, right? Tikvah, mikvah, it is all the concept of hope. What is my hope? What do I want to shift, to change, to be my new reality when I'm going home tonight? Because every cycle is a new transformation, a new opportunity, a new shift in being able to create what exactly we want our reality to be. And meanwhile, there's the idea that while we're at mikvah, this is specifically when our husbands have work to do as well. There is preparation they should be focused on. And that is going to vary person to person for what you need, right? If it's making sure the kids are in bed, the house is cleaned up, you know, dinner's there, whatever it is, so that you're feeling supported, you're feeling taken care of, you're feeling, again, that this is a team, right? Because when there is a problem, when there is an issue, it's not that I have an issue or that he has an issue. We have an issue. We're on the same team. So if there's a problem, it needs to be dealt with together. So in terms of this idea, what do we need? What is going to make us feel relaxed? What is going to make us feel supported and cared for? And that is then what he needs to be done. I mean, there was this great set of pictures. They went around on Facebook, and it was a whole thing about like what women really want. And there was like this very young, attractive guy, you know, in the first picture. And you go to the next picture and he's like vacuuming, you know, and you go to the next picture and he's washing dishes. And the next it was like, you want to get real? Like that's what we find attractive, okay? Change a dirty diaper. That's the big one. You know, like these are the things that are going to work much more than the muscles, much more than this and that. Clean up my house. I will be in a much better mood, right? Feed me a good dinner, whatever it might be. We're all different, but we all know what we need, and that needs to be communicated. And then there's a beautiful thing that says that when a woman comes home from mikvah, that in the Eitz Chaim, it says something very beautiful, that the first thing that should be happening, first of all, is that we communicate, right? The first thing we do is we say, tahor. It is verbalized. We begin with verbal speech before we go into any kind of physical speech. And what's beautiful about that is that tahor is from Tehiru, it says in the Zohar, and Tehiru is like a blank slate. It's like we can start over. We have a new opportunity, right? Transformation when we go into the mikvah. It shifts our reality. A non-Jew goes in as a non-Jew, comes out as a Jew, right? The bride goes in, comes out ready to get married. We as an entire Jewish people went in before receiving the Torah, and then we're in a place to become a nation with our Torah. So too, we go in one state, we come out in a different state. It's a new slate. We're able to recreate and create what it is that we want with that idea, by the way, that's going to be creative. So just to show you, because it's cute, we did our letters, if I can find it. We have 2 more letters after our chetz. So even though this is not limited to the physical, right, that what does intimacy do? What's our next letter? Our tet. We see a Zion, the cute little belly, right? That idea, again, not just limited to physical pregnancy, but that idea of creativity, because what is pregnancy ultimately is being other-centered. That when we are intimate, I can put somebody else at my core, at my center, where I recognize that everything I do is going to impact and affect this person. And then, of course, our last one is our baby, right? Our little yud. And this is what begins every single letter in the Hebrew alphabet. First thing that a sofer does is makes the yud. And it continues. The yud is both the idea of the procreation, and it's also considered the drop of seed. So it's the full circle, again, that we're constantly creating and starting over. But so when the wife first comes home, it's the idea of stating, tahor, tahiru, blank slate, let's start over. This is my hope from the mikvah. Let's make this month totally transformative from before. It says that he is supposed to be complimenting her with as many compliments about every part of her physically and spiritually and emotionally that he can. And then it says that the woman should initiate by hugging and the man should initiate by kissing. And then now we're making the bridge between verbal speech and physical speech, because to hug, there are 4 arms, right? The woman's 2 arms, the man's 2 arms, and to kiss, there are 4 lips. So it says that the 4 arms represent Hashem's name of Adkai, which is basically an aleph, a nun, an aleph, a dalet, a nun, and a yod, which is ani dalet. Like to me, I am a door, I am opening myself up to you. And that for the man, the 4 lips represents the tetragrammaton, the essential Shem Havaya of Hashem, which is the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, which have, as the letters are turned around, Haya, Hova, and Yehia, right? This idea of past, present, and future, that we are going to come together, we are going to embrace. I'm opening myself up. I am opening that door. And why should it start with both of them initiating, so that intimacy is always completely balanced and equal? So that's Renee Chaim saying the hugging and the kissing with these 4 representing these names. This is how intimacy begins. So all this sounds great, and all this is great, as long as everything is great. As I read in some of those more disturbing adjectives describing intimacy, not always the case. So to just go there for a minute, we see something unbelievably powerful, that the same way on a physical level, right, any sight of blood, and we know, full stop, something's wrong, something's a problem, something has to be dealt with. And on a physical level, that is your indication, get to a doctor. You shouldn't be spotting now. There is a problem. When there's a problem, again, it's our problem. We need to fix it. We need to address it. We need to get to the root of it. We need to figure out what's going on. That's physical. However, there are other full stop situations that are not physical, that are not nida in that sense, and yet absolutely require a couple to separate. The Talmud lists 10 situations where, for all other intents and purposes, this couple should be allowed to be physically intimate, and yet they are prohibited from doing so. 10 situations. They're actually pretty mind-blowing. One is if there is coercion or force. Over 1,000 years ago, 1,000 plus, many years ago, the Talmud is saying that spousal rape is prohibited. It did not become prohibited in the United States until 1993 in every state. It is terrifying, but the Talmud tells us from the get-go, never can intimacy come from coercion or force. Number 2, if either despises each other and is only having relations to satisfy physical urges, prohibited. 3, if one's been excommunicated, not so relevant these days, but until tshuva's done. 4, big one here, if either partner is thinking about someone else. Our mind matters. 2 is despises each other, doing it just for physical reasons. 3 is excommunicated. 4 is thinking about someone else. You could go so far as to say thinking about something else. There's actually a terrifying statistic, which of course I didn't write down just so I can mess it up right now, but it was, I think it was that 10% of people admitted to checking their texts during intimacy. I know, horrifying. If your head's not in the right place, right? So, but this is thinking about someone else. 5, if the couple is in the middle of an argument, you cannot be angry at your spouse and be intimate. 6, if either partner is drunk. Needs to come from having your head focused and knowing what you want. 7, if either partner has decided they want to divorce. 8, this is if a woman remarried, so 3 months after, just for paternity reasons. 9, if relations are asked for in a lewd or foul-mouthed way, motivated by lust and not love. I mean, like, this could literally be coming from like Psychology Today. This is the Talmud, okay, straight out of the Talmud. And 10, 9 is lewd or foul-mouthed way. It cannot be from lust. It has to come from love. 10, if the woman is asleep. It is real. Okay, it is rape if the woman is asleep. Her body is not available if she is not awake and choosing to participate in this, even if she is one's wife. So basically, the Talmud is telling us that the Torah approach is that all intimacy needs to come from a place of consent. There needs to be communication. There needs to be mindfulness. There needs to be desire, and it is focused on pleasure. Those are our qualifications, which means if there is a problem, if there is an issue, if these are not being met, something's wrong. Help is needed, intervention is needed, communication is needed, discussion is needed, something needs to be fixed because this is how it's supposed to be, right? So that is our kind of bottom line with that. And the Arizal has a very powerful thing that describes the various situations where you may have heard this expression, but it says that intimacy needs to be panim el panim and not achor el achor, face to face and not back to back. Now, back to back is physically impossible, okay? It is not possible to be intimate back to back. So what is this referring to? Obviously, it is not merely trying to indicate anything in terms of physicality, but what does it actually mean to be face to face versus a back to back situation? So there are 3 stages. So he says that there is achor el achor, back to back. There is achor el panim or panim el achor, a back to front or a front to back. And there is panim el panim, face to face. And that achor is this idea of like acher, when somebody is distracted, when they are not focused. That is our full stop. Those are their 10 situations. When we are not connecting, when we are not seeing the other person, when we are not understanding the other person, when we are not able to relate to them. There's a very powerful idea that a big red flag in a relationship is if a couple can't really look eye to eye and hold a stare. That's a big red flag because that's intimacy. And if you can't look the other person in the eye and you're avoiding that gaze and you're looking away and that's making you uncomfortable, something's wrong. Something's going on. right? You can be physically right next to the person, but feel 1,000,000 miles away. You could be, I don't know about 1,000,000 miles away, but very far away and feel very closely intimate to the person. So the idea is that it has to be a situation where there isn't this acher, that the idea is that somebody is focused on the other. Now, this could come from a physical issue. There could be pain, there could be something wrong, there could be lack of libido, there could be a lot of things that go on. But if it is a physical issue, get that physical help. There are those resources. If it is going to the doctor, if it is a pelvic floor specialist, whoever needs to get involved to figure out what is going on. Why isn't this working? Why isn't this pleasurable? Why is this hurting? Why am I not interested? Why is he not interested? And there are a lot of different things, right? And sometimes we live in agony and we create all these crazy stories in our head about what's wrong with us or what's wrong with him, and not recognizing, again, our problem. And some of the time it has nothing to do with either one of us, right? Oh, it's the medication, an antidepressant can lead to low libido. Oh, it's the, like, look at that. There is a tweak, there is a fix, there is an approach, but let's address it. That's on the physical. It could be emotional. There could be a lot of trauma associated with the physical, with intimacy. Again, there is the spiritual. There are many different problems that could be going on. This is our indication. Seek help. Get to a therapist. Get to a psychologist. Get to a psychiatrist. Get to whoever you need to get to, or your spouse needs to get to, or you both need to get to address this. Because the goal of all of this is to have more intimacy, more pleasure, more love, more connection, and anything that is getting in the way of that, right? Any chatzitza, the same way you can't immerse if there is that chatzitza. So when it exists within our intimacy, it needs to be dealt with. The next concept is that of panim el achor, achor el panim. When one is back to front or front to back. One partner is more interested than the other partner. One partner might not be interested at all. They're achor, they're acher, they're somewhere else. Their head's not into this. They have something going on. Now, it might seem that like, oh, wouldn't that be so great and so ideal if it was always in a state of panim el panim, which we'll get to with this face-to-face, the ultimate level. And the idea is that actually the most incredible level is when you can either turn yourself around or get the other to turn around. That when a partner is not interested and becomes interested, that the pleasure that emanates from the work involved in doing that is even greater than had it been there from the get-go. Because then there's no work involved. There's no self-reflection involved. There's no communication involved, right? We just had this reading with the Parsha that actually it was a good thing that the Luchos broke, because our second set, we were in so much better of a place from what we had gone through, going through our little back to back there, back to front. That was the ultimate back to front, right? Hashem's facing us. We sometimes have our back turned. But part of the idea when we're in a back to front place is that that is the most vulnerable place you can be. Nothing is worse than one partner wanting the other partner, being in a vulnerable state, putting themselves out there and fearing that rejection. And when that happens, it's so easy to want to turn around, right? Now I'm not interested. Now I'm going to turn my back, which puts us in the worst place possible in that back to back. To push ourselves or to work with the other, for them to push themselves to turn around is the greatest challenge, and therefore the greatest level of pleasure when it happens, when that shift can take place, when that work happens, when somebody pushes themselves a little more. And that requires truly prioritizing intimacy. It's the same way Shabbos is not going to just happen on its own. Nobody's like, oh, gosh, that's so convenient. I have nothing else to do for the next 25 hours. So yeah, let's do it. Shabbos. It's planning. It's work. We set aside the time. We know it's coming. We know it's going to happen. We make sure we're ready. It is never going to just happen on its own. Many things we do don't just happen on their own. When we find something important, when we decide something is truly a priority, we make it happen, right? Anybody who wants to go to the gym in the morning, if you really want that to happen, you're going to set your schedule so it can happen. You're going to put out your clothes the night before. You're going to have your shoes ready to go. You're going to be set. You might wake up all pumped in the mood. Great. You might wake up and want to push snooze. But if you find it important, you're going to push yourself. You're going to get to the gym. You're going to start working out. The endorphins are going to kick in. It's going to be amazing. Chances are you're going to leave so happy you did it and you pushed yourself. Now that said, if you get to the gym and you start working out and something hurts and something's wrong and something's bad and I'm not ready for this and maybe I didn't heal from whatever I was just feeling, you stop and you don't keep pushing yourself because now it's not healthy. But that bit of tension where we're pushing ourselves out of our natural zone is right back to the chuppah, right? It's not always as natural to us. We're asked to be above and we're a Zion. He's asked to be a Zion and he's above. But we're pushing because we're saying we're number one. Our marriage is the most important thing. Our intimacy is the most important thing. We need this. This is really healthy for us. How are we going to get there? We're going to utilize the time we're not together to communicate and communicate our needs and focus on what's going on. And we're going to utilize and focus on the time we are together. There is a TED Talk that you can watch right now. Dr. Emily Nagoski. She is a world-renowned sex therapist, and she talks about, through all of her research, the two qualities they found that are necessary for healthy, long-lasting sexual relationships. And the two situations she found is A, that the couple are best friends and have trust, and two, that they prioritize intimacy. Fortunately, thank you very much, Mikvah, we're all set, right? Half the month, we're best friends. Half the month, we can focus on our intimacy in that healthy place. So the achor al panim, the panim el achor, turning it around and reframing it. That's also a big thing. So much of the time I'll get comments from my clients feeling that intimacy is like a favor they're doing for their husbands, as opposed to reframing this that you deserve pleasure. This is a gift for us. The ona is for us to have pleasure. This is not something we are doing for someone else, right? This is not and nothing like we started with that either one is nothing. This is how are we working as a team? How are we building ourselves into that place? And one of the key things as well is to recognize that the most powerful, and this is biologically speaking, most powerful sexual organ we have in our body, it's right here. It is our brain. Our bodies just come along for the ride. It is really our brain. Our pleasure is in our brain. It is what allows us to experience pleasure, and it is going to either create incredible feelings or create horrible feelings. It's all, not all in our head, but our head has unbelievably tremendous power to shift our reality, right? And we're now in Adar, so it's, you know, so nice to be like, oh, just increase your joy, like, but I'm not happy, right? Like that's a big tall order. Like, what if things are hard? What if something's going on? So beautifully enough, Adar is from the same word adir, which means strength. Like, yeah, it might be tough. It's going to take work. It doesn't happen naturally, but you can shift it, which is also why besimcha are the same letters as machshava, which is our thought, right? We can shift it. We can create it. I'm so sorry if I'm like I'm not saying he does. You know, that our head has this ability to change things around. So then ultimately, we have this idea of panim el panim, the face to face. And this is the idea of being truly, fully present. Panim is panemius, it's our internal, we are literally sharing of ourselves, we are physically becoming one, allowing one within us is the most intense, intimate, powerful, unifying thing there possibly is. And that's ultimately the idea. Animals also procreate, but the fact that we can look the other in the eye, this idea of even the hug and the kiss, totally a human concept, that we can take the four arms, we can take the four lips, we can completely have a panemiut panim encounter where we're in totality with this other person, where we're seen and we see the other and ultimately unify. This is going to be the highest, most beautiful place. This is where the mitzvah of Ona comes in, where the man is obligated to pleasure his wife, which by the way requires communication as well, right? Share what we need on all levels, because the other person cannot be expected to be a mind reader. This requires sharing and connecting and being honest with the other. And the same way, we have two mitzvahs that beautifully involve our entire bodies. One is mikvah, where our entire body is part of the mitzvah itself. And the other, obviously, with intimacy, where every part of us is involved in this mitzvah and is therefore elevated and holy through doing it when it's coming from a healthy place, when it's, thank you so much, coming from a creative place and from a place of true consent and focus. And so one last idea before we wrap up, but so there's a powerful explanation that the chait, the sin that took place in the Garden of Eden, right, with Adam and Chava, that the sin that took place first on the most pshat level, it was a issue of miscommunication. And in this case, we're talking verbal communication, right? So Adam is told, you can't touch the tree. Sorry, you can't eat from the tree. He goes ahead, he tells Chava, you can't touch the tree. Snake comes along and says, try it. You can touch the tree. She touches the tree. Well, if you can touch it, you can eat from it. And here we are in Gullus. Thank you very much. All miscommunication. But the Kabbalah on that is that actually the chait that took place, the sin was that they had premature intimacy. They didn't wait for Shabbos, that they were intimate before the proper time. So the same way that what put us in a state of exile was inappropriate intimacy, inappropriate verbal and physical communication. So too, we rectify and bring Geula closer and bring Mashiach closer every time we are intimate in a proper way, in a healthy way, in a productive way, where our bara is bari, where that creation is healthy, which is why, beautifully enough, we see that the word Mashiach is the same word as Messiah, which is a communicator. And that communication always refers both to verbal, how we begin our speech, and physical, how our bodies speak. So just to end, this is Mashiach and Messiah has the same word. I'll tell you. So when it comes to ultimately why was the world created? It was created for our intimacy. It was created for us to love, to feel love, to show love, to connect through love. And we see that very, very beautifully in the symbol that represents love. What's our symbol of love? Heart, right? We were just inundated with it February, all over, the little red heart. So what's really powerful about the heart is that it's a very unique symbol in that you can go anywhere in the world and, this little symbol of the heart means love, which is not true for many other things, right? You're in one country and you figure out how to hail a cab, you go to another country and, you do the same thing and people are like, no. Put that finger down, you're hailing something else, right? That doesn't work here. And it doesn't translate, right? It means peace in one country, it's a gang sign in LA. I mean, you figure out what's going to work. But the heart anywhere in the world means love. So what's the origin of the heart? So about 500 years ago in Christian art and literature, the symbol of the heart started showing up. 700 years ago, give or take, in 1291, there was a Kabbalist by the name of Rabbi Abraham Abulafia, and he has a sefer called Imre Shefer, and in it, he discusses the heart, because what is our Hebrew word for heart? Is lev, which is clearly etymologically related to love. Right, so he explains what is lev. It's lamed beit. The lamed is the highest of all of our letters. Right, it is called a migdal porech ba'avir. It's like the one that crosses above. If you're teaching a kid to write, it's the only letter that is not a final letter that's going to cross above that dotted line, right? So it's breaking out of boundaries, again, out of the natural, into the supernatural, out of a limitation, past it. Lamed also means simultaneously limed and lamad. Right? To teach and to learn, to give and to receive. Exactly what intimacy is. We are giving and receiving simultaneously, which is actually why it says the kiss is the highest form of communication, because it's when we're speaking and listening at the same time, when we've reached above the need for verbal words, and now we can begin the process of talking on a different level. So when you take, he says, you have to understand lamed and then beit being numerically equivalent to our reminder that we are not intended to get through life alone. We need one another. We need one another for the beit is the bayit, to feel at home, to create this home, to be in a place where we can truly be procreative. And that when we take two lameds and we put them face to face, right? Panim el panim, we get this. Okay, we're gonna do that again. We get this. So sweet. Aw, okay. Two lameds, face to face, right? So what is the top of the lamed? Actually, the tippy top of the lamed is called the kotz shel yud. It's the idea of the crown. Again, it's our Ish, Isha, Hashem, right? It's the crown, the king, the ultimate that keeps us together. The Yud is our very first letter, right? Our seed, our chokhmah, our mind, our face, having an intellectual connection, being able to see straight eye to eye with the other, to understand the other, to speak to the other. It continues down into the letter Vav. The Vav, we already know it's the idea of a human being standing upright on the body. It's the neck. It's what transports the blood and oxygen between the head and the rest of the body. Vav means a hook in Hebrew. It's also grammatically Vav hahipuch. It's the idea of transformation. Right, it can change past to present, present to past, vayomer, and he said, right, it is a letter of transformation, and it's a conjunction, ani ve'at, me and you, and then ultimately, we have the chaf. The chaf is the idea of the palm. If I put out my hand, you can put something in it, and I've received, you can take something from it, and I've given, and it's the idea, chaf is koach and poal, potential into actuality. And that ultimately, the world was created for love, which is why when we go right back to our Torah being a scroll, which is a line and a circle simultaneously, Simchas Torah, we end by reading the end of the Torah straight into the beginning. So our Torah ends, L'Einei Kol Yisrael, and begins, Bereshis bara Elokim, in the eyes of all of Israel, God created the world. Wow, such reaction. So in the eyes of all of Israel, God created the world, which means if we look a little more closely, our Torah ends with the letter Lamed, and it begins with the Beit, our Lev, because it is ultimately all about love. When we take the masculine and the feminine and we unite them into one through holy and beautiful and powerful and consensual and mindful and pleasurable intimacy, it is all ultimately love, and it is going to be through that love that we go from Galus into Geula. So thank you very much.